If you didn't hear, Sony spent about 8 years and allegedly upwards of $400 million to publish a little disaster named Concord. It officially released August 23, 2024 for $40, and it attracted a lot of onlookers, just not a lot of paying customers. The game sold 25,000 units across PC and PlayStation for a gross profit of $1 million, landing $399 million short of the mark. Now, but 2 weeks later, Sony repossessed and refunded the game, making Concord the biggest, most expensive game development flop in all of gaming history. For now, Star Citizen's still taking its sweet time. On the surface, Concord appears to be just another executive-enforced trend chase made to dig its own grave in the public square. All the signs were there. The first trailer reveal was a nothing burger, showing nothing but a jiggly burger. The grave got deeper when we found out it was going to be a hero shooter, a most player count-dependent genre in a seemingly saturated market 6 years past its prime. The player characters lacked any discernible style or aesthetic aside from looking like bootleg Guardians of the Galaxy. But totally better, because this time the Peter Quill stand-in has actual quills coming out of him. Destined to die and not worth the autopsy, that's the general prognosis, but I think that's only half true. Concord's death stinks of the usual suspects, yes, out-of-touch corporate trend chasing, but this scenario leaves too much crucial information by the wayside. Metaphorically speaking, the public's got their finger on the right criminal, but they're accusing them of the wrong crime. See, firstly, traditional trend chases are quick and opportunistic, explosive and relatively inexpensive. It's in the name. Trend chase. It's not a trend marathon. When a game takes off, you only have a small window of opportunity to follow up and take part in the fad. Great example of that is Fortnite chasing after the Battle Royale trend set off by PUBG. Fortnite was conceptualized during an Uber ride, cost $20 million, and developed in 2 months using parts from Epic's other game, Fortnite Save the World. Remember, Concord reportedly took 8 consecutive years to make and cost $400 million. That feels way too long and way too expensive. There is a scenario where Concord was actually a 2-year trend chase and then a harsh pivot 4 times in a row. I wouldn't rule out that possibility. After all, that is kind of what happened with Skull and Bones. However, the second telltale feature of a traditional trend chase is the shaky work-in-progress vibe, where it feels like you're playing in a construction site. If a game is racing to be released, then I'm expecting to see some exposed pipes and caution tape. Developers don't know if the game's going to survive the launch, let alone live long enough to experience long-term issues like spaghetti code and legacy information. Worry about the wallpaper after we get the wall up kind of mentality. Concord seemed far too finished on release. Following that logic, the third sign of a traditional trend chase is a lack of plans for success after the fact. Because there is a certain level of self-awareness and wearing of inspirations on the sleeve from developers knowing that they are working on a trend chase. They tend to be surprised if it works. You don't expect to hear a CEO call an unreleased cash grab the future of their company. Maybe they say it'll pay for their next yacht if they're feeling optimistic. But saying a game is a Star Wars-like project is too bold. And mandating more than 10 of these games by 2026 before you've even got one of them working is unusual and unheard of, to say the least. It's worth zooming out and looking at the wider culture, because it's not just Sony who's acting bizarre. There's other AAA executives who got no business in live service now pushing for live service. Sega considered Hyenas to be a super game worth investing $882 million, more than twice what Concord ended up costing. But ultimately, Hyenas was shut down in 2023 after 5 years of development. We don't know how much it ended up costing, but that is allegedly Sega's most expensive game to date. That's no laughing matter. Platinum Games failed with Babylon's Fall and made all kinds of weird cryptic statements. The projects that we are trying to create for the future will be different in terms of their structure. Considering the changes in the market over the next 5 years or so, I think it's absolutely necessary for us to do this. I'm sorry for being so vague, but I think that's all I can tell you right now. It took about 5 years to develop, released in 2022, and shut down a few months later in 2023. Amazon Games developed Crucible for 6 years, officially launched in May 2020, and took it down a few months later in November 2020. They also worked on a game called Breakaway for roughly 3 or 4 years and never officially released it. The exact numbers are harder to find, but it's reported that during this period, Amazon was spending at least $500 million a year on their gaming branch. This pattern of behavior from multiple higher-ups in different studios is why I don't think Concord or any of these guys are trend chasing in the traditional sense. It feels more like an arms race. It's too premeditated and dogmatic regardless of failure and success. Example there is Warner Brothers' Harry Potter game was the highest selling game of 2023, and their release of Suicide Squad was a low point for them. Yet Warner Brothers said they would double down on the failed live service model until it worked. Why so stubborn? I have enough experience to wager a guess, but after talking to developers, producers, and games media folk, I'm pretty much certain that there are too many money-first middlemen, investors, and executives calling the shots. The creatives and sensible business-savvy folk have been shuffled out of the impactful roles and no longer have much of a say. That sounds dramatic, but it's an almost inevitable cycle that we see in different industries. A creative person makes something successful, and if they don't know how or don't care to handle the business side, they hand it off to someone else. A quality-first individual with background in management, engineer types are what you want for the long term. Money-first people with backgrounds in stocks, banking, sales, manufacturing are great for two things: balancing the books and saying no to them when they try to get creative, otherwise they will run your operation like a factory. They're great at that, and their success there is how they end up in positions of power here in the video game industry, where their methods don't translate as well in the long term. It's a different philosophy, it's this attitude that's overcome us. You want to know what led to Blizzard's fall from grace? Here's the CEO, Bobby Kotick, talking about the change in culture from creative-led to suit-led. You have studio heads who 5 years ago didn't know the difference between a balance sheet and a bed sheet who are now arguing allocations in our CFO's office pretty regularly. We have a real culture of thrift. The goal that I had in bringing a lot of the packaged good folks into Activision about 10 years ago was to take all the fun out of making video games. Mission accomplished. It is my belief that greedy executives and the middle management money buddies that are allowed control of a video game operation will eventually drive it into the ground because that's the playbook that's always worked for them. And there is no incentive for them to improve or adapt, because if they get fired, they get a massive golden parachute send-off worth millions of dollars. In my opinion, that's the biggest, most successful scam currently being run in corporate America. Now let's talk about how that money-first mentality translates to game design. They're spending a lot of money over a long period of time, but have you noticed that they're effectively tripping over themselves to create the same type of game? These executives say they're gambling on an ambiguous future. They don't know what it looks like, but they know it's coming. They can make anything they want. Chess too. There's JRPGs, why not K and LRPGs as well? Yet they're rolling the dice on role-based, team-based, multiplayer versus player experiences held together in a perpetually online live service wrapper. Maybe they all got the same cherry tomato popping loser in their ear leading them astray, but that seems highly unlikely. What's more likely is because they all think the same way, that being a money-first philosophy, they've all come up with the same solution. And here's how you get there. First, lay out the goals. Make the most profit possible. To make the most profit possible, you have to increase your revenue as high as you can, and just as importantly, you need to drop your costs to as low as you can. This principle here, maximizing profit by increasing revenue and decreasing costs, is why we hear about AAA games selling really well one day, and then the team gets laid off or the studio gets shut down the next. Goal's been marked, now let's choose a monetization model that best serves our goal. You've got the classic, pay an upfront fee, get a game back, end of transaction. Oh, how far we've strayed from the light of God. Problem there is you'll really only generate money once per customer. You'll have to make another game or an expansion to get them again, but it costs money to make more game. How about a subscription model? It lets you get multiple transactions from the same person throughout the year, but have gone a bit out of vogue. And if you ever stop making content, so do the reasons to resubscribe. So we end up at live service and cosmetic sales that have shown, historically, the potential to have the highest return on investment. But you still have to make more content to keep your game relevant and people interested in returning. But you can get out of this cycle, thus lowering your costs even more by making the gamers the content. That's how we end up choosing multiplayer for our game. It's like choosing to have 2 kids instead of 1 so they'll entertain each other and leave you alone. Competitive multiplayer games tend to hold on to a fan base longer because going against other players, winning and losing, is considered the core gameplay loop. Every time you face off against a different team, it's new content, so to speak. We've narrowed it down to live service, multiplayer, team, PvP, but why a role-based game? That is simply to have as much broad appeal as possible. If everyone's playing as the same character and fulfilling the same role, then you're only creating one playstyle and attracting one type of person. Making different roles lets you attract people who like to play as supports, tanks, summoners, flankers, all different kinds of players, and this creates various permutations of interaction to keep people hooked for hundreds, if not thousands of hours. With this approach, you can cast as wide a net as possible, and it further entangles the players that are already present. You want die-hard fans because they're the ones that stream your game, make videos of your game, talk about your game on social media, at home, at work, at school. They invite others to play with them. They help onboard new players. And this saves you money on marketing. And if you have a base that's committed enough and you provide them the tools, you can even have the gamers make the rest of the game for you. That is what executives are after. A game with as wide appeal as possible that markets itself, effectively makes itself, and that they get to monetize over and over again to keep costs down, revenue up, and maximize profits. Theoretically, there's no cap to how much money a game like that can make. In fact, games like this kind of already exist. League of Legends is a free-to-play role-based 5v5 MOBA whose core gameplay hasn't changed all that much in nearly 2 decades but rakes in anywhere from $1 to $3 billion annually. Dota 2 is also a free-to-play role-based 5v5 MOBA whose core gameplay hasn't strayed too far from its beaten path since 2013 and generated $293 million in 2023 alone from battle passes, and others have tried to develop a game like these. There's an entire cemetery of MOBAs with a lot of money and time invested in them. Blizzard Heroes of the Storm released 2015 and put in maintenance mode in 2022. Gearbox Battleborn released in 2016 and shut down in 2021. Gigantic released in 2017 and shut down in 2018. Amazon Games Crucible released in May 2020 and discontinued in November 2020. Epic's Paragon soft released in 2016 and officially canceled in 2018. This has happened before. Hero shooters are effectively MOBAs in a perpetual teamfight stage without minions and towers, which makes the genre even more accessible and gives it potentially even wider appeal. But again, it doesn't matter if it has wide appeal if it can't be repeatedly monetized. Blizzard had Overwatch and they replaced it with Overwatch 2, which by now has turned into Overwatch 1 but with a free-to-play monetization model. If there's any one game that I can point to as being a business executive's wet dream, it would be Valve's Counter-Strike Global Offensive. It was released in 2012, now known as Counter-Strike 2, and it generated over $1 billion from loot boxes alone in 2023. 8 years of development time and $400 million doesn't sound like such a bad investment now, does it? The players entertain each other and have kept it relevant as one of the most popular esports games in the world, and the best part, the gamers not only make the maps for future content releases, they also make the skins that Valve sells. Only thing it's missing is the roles and the different characters, but maybe that's why Valve's creating Deadlock. Unfortunately, there is a major flaw when designing MOBAs and hero shooters. It takes more players to reach critical mass than any other genre, so they tend to fizzle out before we can really see what they're made of. And it doesn't take much for them to fall apart later down the road. But I'll save that discussion for the next video. It's more math than discussion really, and I'd need another drink for that. A few quick updates before we part ways though. Cold Take's going to continue to stay on this channel and it's going to focus on business, culture, and investigative journalism. I'm also looking to start another series where I audit live service games so that consumers can see how their time and money is being spent. It's something I enjoyed doing with Helldivers 2, and I wish I was the guy that found that Destiny 2 was bugged. If you have any suggestions for games that you feel have dodgy economies or are respectfully monetized, then feel free to leave them in the comments. There's also live content I stream over at twitch.tv/TheOtherFrost. We do puzzles and quizzes for warm-ups and then a bit of critical discussion over gaming news and some game showcasing. If you're wondering about review content, Will and I did start up a Substack and we are creating another YouTube channel just for review content. I'll be sure to keep you posted on that. We do have a community Discord now, links in the description if you want to stay posted even sooner. Now let's see here, I'm in another video game. This will be my third one working with Fatbot Games. We did Vaporum Lockdown, and now this one's called Gravelord. I'm not sure when it fully releases, but you can wishlist it now if you want, and there is a demo at my time of making this video. And finally, for those that wish to support my endeavors financially, there is the Ko-Fi, the Patreon, the Substack, the Twitch. Pick your favorite. All links will be in the description. And as always, thank you for watching.